Heartrealm. This is a journal that was kept by an agent who spent some time in the realm where the Queen of Hearts resides. Part of the Rincon 14 task force, also known as the Red Roses, they are specialised undercover operatives, posing as subjects under the Tyrant Queen. It's important to note that the agent had been inside Heartland for nearly a year, small amount of time considering. But the agent's writing betrays a kind of traumatic echo, not unlike one who has undergone psychological and physical abuse, as well as Stockholm Syndrome. First entry dated an unknown numerical representation of time within Heartrealm. I've simplified the entries by rewriting them to represent the days spent in that realm. So as far as we know, this particular agent known as Roth1 begins this log on day 30. There is no particular pattern or procession of normal astronomical, stars or planets that would follow in any type of universal physics, so it seems better just to stick with something simple.
Day 30. I finally have time and materials to write this journal. I'll make these reports brief to minimize my chances of being discovered. There is no real law and order here, just removal of your head, if the Queen commands. I've seen how the guards swarm upon those Her Majesty has deemed unworthy. They bring their heads to her with a fury and desperation unlike anything I've seen. I understand now that failure to bring what the Queen desires is grounds for decapitation, and unfortunately, from what I witnessed here, the chopping off of their heads does not equal their deaths. The bodies go about the dungeons aimlessly, while some just stop moving. The heads belong to the Queen, and rumours are that she keeps them all in some dark room, or that she'll go to speak with them. It's also with that, the heads are gagged, so despite the ability to still scream and cry out in anguish, they are not permitted such luxury. This has brought about a greater percentage of the deck officers to behave very thoroughly with their law enforcement, labelling all exceptions as rebels. These rebels are often caught, but they also tend to do a lot of damage as far as defacing the Crown's property. Most of the rebels are joyful to go against Her Majesty's will and gladly destroy or graffiti all the structures of the Queen's administrative theme throughout the realm. Namely, the Heart theme. Currently, I am being put up in a sort of boarding school to assimilate into Heartrealm culture. Such notions are enough to make anyone sick to assimilate into this culture. That would require one to become a lost soul, separated from obtaining a moment of clarity, and to attempt otherwise it's to court a fate, worse than death. Day 33. I find myself becoming less enchanted by this place day by day. Nothing is done here without triggering more hysterical madness. I may have to go and have an audience with Queen soon. Just writing that sentence makes me sick to my stomach. Day 34. I was given a sort of welcome basket that passes for food here. I will not describe what it consists of. Everything in the dormitory smells like a litter box or is covered in rat droppings. Day 40. I was caught writing in this journal, but they only wrote me a ticket, so I won't go writing in public again. Maintaining my cover has been easy, but living on crumpets, mushrooms, and candy hearts while constantly looking over my shoulder is a whole different experience. Day 45. This is the weekend or so, I reckon. I still have no bearings on what is even considered an hour, let alone when a birthday is, or holidays, or weekends. They seem to be foreign ideas. Day 49. I met with several individuals who were like-minded in the search for information. Especially the Queen. They're likey informants like some sort of controlled opposition. Each one would probably, and will likely end up selling the others out. The end result for all involved parties is what's known as the national favourite pastime. I will stick with these planted agents. They will lead me directly to the Queen one way or another. Day 50. I woke up this morning to news that one of those conspirators I had tea with yesterday has already spilled the beans about the conspiracy. So much for yesterday's plan. As much as I want that interview with Her Majesty, I don't want to have as just a head. Day 52. New friends made a coffee house. Day 53. They're going to lose their heads if they try anything now, those fools. Not holding my breath, though. Day 56. Another resistance cell is exterminated. If those cards really are controlled opposition, I'd be surprised. More than likely, they're just dim. About the same IQ a deck of playing cards would have. No joke. I can't imagine how governments are run here. Day 58. Seasonal floods come around this time by my reckoning every 15 days or so, like clockwork. The surf surges and Heartrealm spends a whole cycle soaked if not drowned. It's pretty bad. People need help. Day 59. I'm getting a crew assembled to organise a rescue and refugee operation. The race is on to dry Heartrealm out before everything rots. Day 61. Putting the White Heart relief effort in the hands of my officers has been both rewarding and frustrating. Flooded areas are now just mud, and it hasn't helped things now that there is also a drought. Patrols are being sent in pairs of 2 down to the beachfront. So much has washed out into the sea that is necessary to have those patrols spot items or individuals who are washed up on shore or who need rescue. My agents are encouraged to forage for food along the sands and should bring news of any food or freshwater sources immediately. Day 64. We accomplished a great deal. Residents were in tears when we passed by their homesteads. Efforts are continuing to rescue all the victims of the recent flood, which I was told was one of the biggest ones they've ever seen. Day 236. It's been a very long time since I've gotten to write in this journal, and a lot has happened, unfortunately. All of my efforts in organisation in creating the White Hart Initiative that helped relocate and recover all of Heartland from the flood were instantly ended by a visit from the King just 2 days ago. But I was invited to go see the Queen and plead my case, so I've been waiting for the carriage that will take me there. Day 240. I've made it all the way to Heartrealm's castle. I have been told that it's not necessarily a trial, and that I'm going to be participating in a game. Apparently, a life-size chessboard is going to be made, and they want me to help organise it. So the Queen told me that the cards were holding them captive. It was no comfort having travelled so far with great anticipation to interview the Queen of Hearts only to discover that she was a lunatic and a tyrant. Her initial claims that the cards held her captive was likely true, but escape could be possible. It could be done safely, or so we thought at the time. Still, I played along, Your Grace. I am most intrigued to hear about the life-size chessboard you've announced to be constructed, I told the Queen. Yes, she said, I have promised the construction workers. They will learn a new definition of deadline if they don't finish in time. Haha, check. I moved my king to escape the check, however. This would mean that I could no longer make a castle move. I cannot stand playing checkers. The Queen went on, do you understand chess was the only other option? I find it to be a most devious game, and an excellent distraction. Don't you agree? I nodded quite right on both accounts. Your Majesty, yes, checkers is awful, and chess makes up for the checkerboard existence. The Queen reacted slightly violently to that. Do you know that's what I told Toad of a husband of mine? Isn't that so, my dear? The King scoffed and replied, Yes, well, my love. Even so, you mainly hate checkers because you never beat me at it once. Perhaps the Queen said. But to answer your question, we are so excited to have it completed that we can hardly contain ourselves. The celebration. Yes, the celebration. I want you to organise it all for us. The King went on to talk about his reports from the White Hart Initiative and how it was a great example of how to deal with an emergency. I eventually would challenge the King to a game, and at the mention of that, the Queen at once stood up and flung the chess pieces into the air, and by the time the pieces had all reached the floor, the board landed back on the table with the checkers now set up, ready to play. I, of course, managed to win against the King, and that pleased the Queen. When I asked them about what details they would need me to help them with, their attitudes changed. The King then said, You heard the Queen tell you that we are prisoners here. And we are, but we also happen to be in charge here. So what keeps us here? It's not the chess or the checkers. Heartrealm is not our jail cell. It is, however, most likely going to be our tomb. I fell silent and gave the King my full attention. His level-headed version of insanity was easier to deal with than the Queen's. The King told me that he came to Heartland with his Queen dying of a heart issue, and they believed that if they returned to the realm beyond the rabbit hole, they would die. Being here delayed their conditions beyond their wildest expectations. The King told me what they had found was the source of the floods, and they followed it to what they believed was a portal to another realm in a place called the Dark Abyss, and I would be the one they would send down there to test it. I knew they were not joking. I played along till I could no longer, and then I made a run for it, but the guards all fell upon me, and soon I was marched to an underground passage beneath the castle. Eventually, the canal of water opened to us, and a small boat was waiting. I had been bound by ropes, but I wasn't struggling. In theory, if they found a gate between realms, such a useful path would revolutionize how we gather intel, not to mention move about. Said realms, without having to pay the spacing guild, would mean that no correspondence would risk being intercepted, and if not, I would probably drown down there. I had been using the time to practice deep breathing, and steel myself for what strange thing I was going to face. I had to at least act astonished, if not scared to death. The portal these crazy Heartrealms think they could hold. These two crazy people captive, or was it the other way around? At some point, I closed my eyes and decided I wouldn't open them after all. What I felt was the cool, damp underground passage further down we went the more water was present. I could hear drips from the ceiling and other indications of being in a cavern. It was easily 3 hours of descending before the party stopped, and we had come to a precipice. Though maybe it was an underground lake below it all. I was positioned at the edge, and forced into kneeling. I had been breathing intently and bracing myself for the sudden immersion into some dark pool of water. Would it come when my breath wasn't ready? Would I choke and drown before even appreciating this so-called gate and their little escape plan? Did the king and queen know that I was an agent and ready to face these dangers? I had to keep preparing myself to die, continuously holding out against all hope, for however long they left me on that ledge. It was more psychological abuse than what came next. It was a solid kick, probably from the queen, and I fell off the ledge, and I fell and fell. Expected to hit water right away. Instead, it seemed fantastically long. Bound as I was, I couldn't right away control how I was falling. I stopped hearing the sound of air in my ears after about a minute. The sound of my own thumping heart became like an endless row of clocks. I could feel the cold cave begin to warm up like a pool of lava waited for me below. I could feel it. It was probably going to burn. Everything the Heartland rulers said was a lie. It was an execution. I forced my hands to be falling first, and they began to itch from the heat. And by that time the bond on my wrist had burned away because I think they were actually made of rose vines. I regained a form that allowed me to move my fall in a way that I had some control of how I was going to fall. I did not find a side or a wall to run into, but I did fall into a rabbit hole. Who knows how many were dotted across the abyss like Swiss cheese. And as my momentum carried me into the tunnel, I felt the rest of my clothing turn to ash. I was on fire. The eye slammed into mud. The blindfold had burned away, so had my eyelids. So I still couldn't close them, and with the clogs of mud working into those unusable lids, I frantically began digging through what I thought was going to be my way up. Who knows how long I had to dig, and if it was even in the correct direction. But I had to try. There was no backing off at this point. I would either die or make it out, and I used my frayed skin's remaining ability to feel pain as a compass. I tore the mud rapidly, trying to detect what was more water than dirt. The third-degree burns were awful. I expect my lungs had burst. I didn't know that I was even still alive and scrambling through the mud. It felt like being submerged. Now I was in water, and it would eventually buy myself in the deep, and all that was between me and freedom was... I don't remember. I don't remember swimming. I don't know how I got up there. I couldn't move. Light had begun to flash in front of me, like how you see light when you're underwater. That sensation of being on sand and solid ground is what I awoke to with an undignified gasp. Was this the afterlife? From my point of view, it was like I had already come out of hell. There are those who theorize that I was rescued by a walrus or a turtle, but before I would eventually lose consciousness, the vague impression I could sense around me was wings and then massive tiger-sized paws soaked and heavy, with fur grasping my numbing body tightly.
Editor's note: as far as our investigation inquiries into the matter, Roth 1 is the only agent to survive from the Rankin 14 task force. It's possible that those agents are responsible for the ultimate fate of the Heartrealm tyrants, since the rabbit holes have been cemented over and there has been complete isolation and silence from that place since then. If what the two maniacs said is true, then they are still alive and suspended from dying within that underground prison and are at the mercies of what amounts to a killer deck of cards.